August 15th, 1942. Bovingdon Airfield, Hertfordshire, England. The morning mist parts like a theater curtain as the first P-38 Lightning taxis onto the runway. Its twin Allison engines roar in unsynchronized harmony, a sound that will soon become the death knell of the Luftwaffe. Though no one knows it yet. Major Jack Jenkins stands beside the control tower, arms crossed, watching his British ground crew gather in small clusters, pointing and whispering. One mechanic shakes his head and mutters something that makes his companions laugh. Jenkins knows what they're thinking. He's heard it all before. The P-38 Lightning looks like nothing else in the sky. Two fuselages stretch back from a central nacelle, connected by a graceful wing that spans 52 feet. The twin booms house the engines and landing gear, while the pilot sits in the center pod, isolated, exposed, riding what looks like a connecting bridge between two separate aircraft. To the uninitiated, it appears ungainly, overcomplicated, a designer's fever dream that somehow escaped the drafting table and made it into production. The Germans have their own name for it. Intelligence reports reveal Der Gabelschwanz Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. But that name carries a mockery in 1942, not fear. Luftwaffe pilots joke about the flying fuel truck in their ready rooms. They've seen the Lightning's massive fuel capacity, 410 gallons internally, with drop tanks adding another 300, and they laugh. All that weight, they reason, must make it slow, cumbersome, an easy kill once you get on its tail. Lieutenant Franz Stegler, a rising ace with Jägerschwader 27, will later recall the dismissive briefings. We were told the Americans had built a bomber escort that couldn't escort and a fighter that couldn't fight. It was heavy, they said, unmaneuverable. It would fall from the sky like a pregnant goose if you gave it a good burst. The joke spreads through Luftwaffe squadrons stationed in France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Pilots paint caricatures on ready room walls, bloated P-38s with cartoon faces, struggling to stay airborne under the weight of their fuel tanks. The mockery intensifies when early P-38 encounters prove disappointing. In North Africa, the Lightning struggles with engine problems. High-altitude turbo-supercharger issues plague the aircraft. Pilots complain about compressibility problems during high-speed dives. The controls lock up, leaving them helpless as they plummet earthward. Technical troubles aren't the Lightning's only problem. The U.S. Army Air Forces deploy it everywhere at once, spreading the aircraft thin across multiple theaters. North Africa, Pacific Islands, England. No single squadron accumulates enough experience to unlock the aircraft's true potential. Pilots transition from single-engine fighters, struggling to master the twin-engine beast. The learning curve is steep, written in blood and burning wreckage. But Jenkins knows something the Germans don't. Lockheed engineers are working around the clock in Burbank, California, fixing the problems. New engine intercoolers, hydraulically boosted ailerons for better roll response, dive recovery flaps to prevent compressibility lockup. Most importantly, they're perfecting the Lightning's true purpose, not as a dogfighter, but as a long-range escort capable of reaching targets no other Allied fighter can touch. The P-38's twin-boom design isn't a flaw. Its brilliance disguised as awkwardness. Those booms house turbo superchargers that give the Lightning devastating performance above 25,000 feet. Precisely where B-17 and B-24 bombers struggle through flak and fighters over German industrial centers. The central nacelle positions the armament perfectly: 4.50 caliber machine guns and 120 mm cannon, all mounted in the nose, firing directly along the pilot's line of sight. No convergence issues, No wing-mounted guns requiring complex harmonization. Point the nose, squeeze the trigger, and concentrated firepower streams toward the target like a laser. On the runway, Captain Thomas McGuire finishes his pre-flight check and gives the thumbs up. He's one of the new breed, aggressive, confident, determined to prove the Lightning's worth. His aircraft gleams in the weak English sunlight, freshly painted with olive drab and neutral gray camouflage, beneath the cockpit. His crew chief has stenciled a name Pudgy. McGuire doesn't know it yet, but he's destined to become America's second highest scoring ace, with 38 confirmed kills. He doesn't know that the P-38 will carry him through 213 combat missions before his luck runs out over the Philippines. Right now, he only knows what every Lightning pilot feels, the raw, almost sexual thrill of strapping into the most powerful fighter in the American arsenal. The twin Allisons climb to full throttle. The Lightning accelerates down the runway, surprisingly quick despite its 15,000 pound weight. At 90 miles per hour, McGuire pulls back on the yoke. The aircraft lifts smoothly, gracefully, climbing into the overcast sky. Within minutes, it disappears into the clouds. 3,000 miles away, in a concrete bunker beneath Luftwaffe headquarters in Berlin. Intelligence officers update their assessment of American fighter capabilities. The P-38 Lightning receives a threat rating of moderate. Recommended countertactics emphasize exploiting its supposed poor maneuverability and high-speed control issues. The report concludes with a reassuring note: the Lightning poses no significant threat to operations over the Reich. It is perhaps the most catastrophic intelligence failure of the air war. January 27, 1943. Schweinfurt, Germany. Oberleutnant Egon Mayer banks his Bf-109 G6 through a layer of cirrus clouds at 28,000 feet, scanning the sky with the practiced efficiency of a predator. Below him, the ball-bearing factories of Schweinfurt sprawl across the winter landscape, vital arteries of the German war machine. Every panzer, every aircraft, every piece of military equipment depends on the precision bearings manufactured in those buildings. He knows the Americans know this. Intelligence reports have warned for months that Schweinfurt will be hit eventually. But not today, Mayer thinks. Not without paying an unthinkable price. The 8th Air Force has tried before. In August, they sent 230 B-17s to Schweinfurt in daylight. Unescorted beyond the limited range of P-47 Thunderbolts and RAF Spitfires. Mayer's squadron, along with dozens of others, tore through the bomber formations like chainsaws through silk. 60 bombers fell from the sky. The Americans called it Black Thursday. They haven't been back since. Mayer's radio crackles, Achtung, grosse Formation, bearing 270 Angels 25. He spots them a massive box formation of B-17s, perhaps 80 aircraft, their contrails riding white lines across the blue sky. The flying fortresses maintain tight formation, their .50 caliber machine guns bristling from every turret. Mayer feels the familiar surge of adrenaline. Another turkey shoot, another chance to add to a score of 102 confirmed kills. Then he sees them. Silver glints above and behind the bombers, not the stubby silhouettes of P-47s, limited to 425-mile combat radius. Not Spitfires, even more range-restricted. These aircraft are different twin-boomed, sleek, maintaining formation at 26,000 feet like hunting wolves. P-38 Lightnings, deep over Germany, impossible. Gabelschwanz Teufel, someone mutters over the radio. But the mockery is gone from the voice, replaced by something Mayer hasn't heard in 2 years of combat uncertainty. He counts them. 16, no, 20. They're flying a fluid weave pattern above the bombers, scissoring back and forth, covering every approach vector. Mayer has seen gun camera footage from North Africa and the Pacific, studied the Lightning's supposed weaknesses. Poor roll rate. Compressibility problems? Pilots who don't know how to use the aircraft properly. These pilots look like they know exactly what they're doing. Major Gerald Johnson leads the escort mission from 27,000 feet. His oxygen mask tight against his face, eyes constantly sweeping the sky. This is the 55th Fighter Group's first deep penetration mission into Germany, a historic moment that Johnson understands with crystal clarity. For 18 months, American bombers have been slaughtered because no fighter could escort them all the way to target and back. The British tried with Spitfires, not enough range. The P-47S gave it their best, still not enough. Only the Lightning has the legs for this mission, 450 miles to target. Combat, 450 miles home. 1,000 miles of hostile airspace. Johnson's aircraft carries two 165-gallon drop tanks under the wings, with internal fuel and drop tanks combined. His P-38J has a combat radius of 585 miles. He can reach Berlin if necessary. Today's target, Schweinfurt, is child's play by comparison. Bandits, 11 o'clock high. The warning crackles through his headset. Bf-109S and FW-190S dive from the sun, the classic German tactic. But Johnson is ready. Blue flight, take them. Red flight stays with the bombers. 8 P-38S break formation and climb to meet the attackers. The Germans expect the Americans to dive away, use their superior speed to escape the standard defensive tactic. Instead, the Lightnings climb directly into the attack. And Mayer suddenly realizes his terrible mistake. At 26,000 feet, his Bf-109 is approaching its operational ceiling. The Daimler-Benz DB-605 engine struggles in the thin air, producing barely 1,000 horsepower. But the Lightning's twin Allison V1, 1,710 engines, each equipped with turbo superchargers, are in their element. At this altitude, they produce one 425 horsepower, each two 850 horsepower total. The P-38 accelerates like a rocket, climbing at angles that seem to defy physics. Lieutenant Robert Shorty Ahrens, flying wing for Johnson, locks onto a Bf-109, attempting a diving attack on a B-17. The German pilot commits to his run, perhaps thinking he can hit the bomber before the Lightning can react. Ahrens pushes his throttles forward, feeling the twin Allisons respond instantly. The Lightning accelerates to 420 miles per hour in seconds. The closing speed is catastrophic for the German. Ahrens centers the Bf-109 in his reflector gun sight, leads it slightly, and presses the trigger. 4 50 caliber machine guns and 120 mm cannon erupt simultaneously. All 5 weapons fire along the same axis, creating a cone of destruction 3 feet wide at 300 yards. There's no dispersion, no need to calculate convergence. The shells walk up the Messerschmitt's fuselage like a surgeon's incision. The Bf-109's canopy explodes. The right wing shears off at the root. The aircraft enters a flat spin, tumbling through 25,000 feet of sky. Ahrens doesn't watch it fall already. He's scanning for the next target. Mayer brakes hard left, trying to escape the diving Lightning behind him. His 109 groans under the G-forces, the wings flexing dangerously. He rolls inverted and pulls through. A classic defensive break. But when he looks back, the P-38 is still there, matching his every move. This can't be happening. The Lightning is supposed to be slow, unmaneuverable. But this aircraft rolls with him, stays glued to his 6 o'clock, closing the distance with terrifying speed. Mayer firewalls his throttle, desperate for separation. The Daimler-Benz screams, but he's already at maximum speed, 360 miles per hour at this altitude. The Lightning pilot, Lieutenant Jack Ilfrey, though Mayer will never know his name, barely needs to adjust his throttle. At 400 miles per hour, he closes to 200 yards. The P-38's nose lights up. Mayer's instrument panel disintegrates. Shells punch through his seat armor, one round grazing his shoulder, another shattering his left knee. Fire erupts from the engine cowling. He has perhaps 3 seconds before the fuel tanks explode. He reaches for the canopy jettison handle, pulls hard, and the wind blast hits him like a hammer. Pain shoots through his leg as he rolls inverted and falls free. The parachute opens with a brutal snap, and he looks up in time to see his Bf-109, his beautiful, deadly Bf-109 that carried him through 102 victories, cartwheel into a cloud bank and disappear. Above, the battle continues. FW-190S attempts slashing attacks, diving from 30,000 feet at 400 miles per hour, firing quick bursts before breaking away. But the Lightnings anticipate every move. They split into pairs, one maintaining position over the bombers, while the second chases down the attackers. The Germans discover too late that the P-38 is faster in level flight, faster in a dive, and most shocking, nearly as maneuverable when flown by a skilled pilot. By the time the bomber formation turns for home, 7 German fighters burn in the snow below. The 55th Fighter Group loses 1 aircraft, a P-38 with engine failure that limps back to England on a single Allison, the dead engine windmilling uselessly. The pilot nursing his crippled aircraft across the channel at 150 feet, finally belly landing in a farmer's field outside Dover. The B-17S dropped their bombs with unprecedented accuracy. Not a single bomber falls to fighters over the target. The Schweinfurt ball-bearing plants burn. In his ready room that evening, Johnson files his after-action report. His hand shakes slightly as he writes, not from fear, but from exhaustion and the adrenaline crash that follows 5 hours in the cockpit at 30,000 feet. He describes the engagement in clinical terms: altitude, speeds, deflection angles, confirmed kills. He doesn't mention the radio chatter he heard from German pilots, the increasingly desperate calls for reinforcements, the panic in their voices as they realized the Americans had finally arrived with a fighter that could protect the bombers all the way to target. He doesn't need to. The Germans will make that clear enough in the weeks to come. March 6, 1944. Berlin, Germany. General Major Adolf Galland stands before a map of Europe. Red pins marking Luftwaffe fighter bases, blue pins tracking American bomber formations. The map looks like a disease spreading across the continent, blue pins penetrating deeper each week, red pins disappearing one by one. He lights another cigarette, his 4th in an hour, and tries to find words that won't sound like surrender. Mein Führer, he begins, addressing the room of senior officers. The situation has become critical. The statistics tell a story more brutal than any battle report. In January 1943, the Luftwaffe controlled the skies over Germany. Fighter pilots racked up kills with impunity, tearing apart unescorted bomber formations. Egon Mayer developed the head-on attack, diving through bomber formations from 12 o'clock high, exploiting the B-17's weakest defensive position. It worked brilliantly until the P-38S arrived. Now, 14 months later, The mathematics of attrition have reversed. For every American fighter lost, Germany loses 2. The ratio worsens weekly. Experienced pilots die faster than training schools can replace them. Young men with 50 hours of flight time climb into Bf-109S to face American veterans with 300 combat missions. But the real killer isn't pilot skill or aircraft numbers. It's range. The P-38 Lightning can reach any target in Germany, remain on station for 30 minutes of combat, and return to England. The Germans have nothing comparable. The Bf-109's combat radius is 350 miles. The FW-190 manages 300. They can defend the Reich's borders. But once the Americans penetrate deep to Berlin, Leipzig, Munich, German fighters must choose between engaging over the target and running out of fuel, or conserving fuel and allowing the bombers free rein. The Americans exploit this weakness with surgical precision. They send bomber streams in multiple directions, forcing the Luftwaffe to split its forces. When German fighters commit to one formation, P-38S from another vector sweep in and massacre them from above and behind. The Lightning's superior high-altitude performance, once mocked as irrelevant, has become the decisive factor. At 28,000 feet, a P-38 J-15 can fly 420 miles per hour, climb at 2,850 feet per minute, and turn inside anything the Luftwaffe can field. We are losing the air war, Gallen says quietly, not because of courage or skill, but because we cannot reach the battle. April 24th, 1944. Over Brunswick, Germany. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Jenkins leads 48 P-38S from the 20th Fighter Group deep into German airspace. This is his 73rd mission, his 3rd tour of duty. He's 26 years old and feels 50. The faces change in the ready room, fresh pilots arriving weekly. Empty chairs multiplying, but the missions never stop. Every day, weather permitting, the 8th Air Force sends 1,000 bombers into Germany. And every day, the P-38 groups fly escort. Today's target is the Messerschmitt factory at Brunswick. Intelligence estimates 200 German fighters will defend it. Jenkins believes the estimate is conservative. He's right. At 1340 hours, ground control radios a warning. Multiple bogies, 12 o'clock level, Angels 2-8. Jenkins spots them a swarm of Bf-109S and FW-190S, perhaps 60 aircraft, climbing to intercept. But something is different today. The Germans aren't diving through the bombers and running. They're forming a defensive circle, a Gefechtsverband, trying to protect each other from the P-38S they know are coming. This is Falcon Leader. Jenkins transmits. Red and blue flights. Take the high cover. Yellow and green. We're going in. The P-38S dive from 30,000 feet. Building speed. Jenkins watches his airspeed indicator climb 350, 380, 410 miles per hour. The German formation breaks apart as the Lightnings tear through it like wolves through a flock of sheep. This isn't the disciplined Luftwaffe of 1940, the precision-killing machine that conquered France and nearly broke Britain. These are boys and exhausted veterans, flying aircraft that haven't seen proper maintenance in months, burning fuel they can barely afford to waste. Lieutenant Klaus Fischer, 19 years old with 47 hours of combat time, sees the P-38 too late. He tries to turn, but his Bf-109 G6 is heavy with fuel and ammunition. Sluggish in the thin air, the Lightning's nose erupts with muzzle flashes. Fischer feels the impacts before he hears them, a hammering vibration running through the airframe. His canopy shatters. Something hot slices across his forehead. Oil pressure drops to 0. The Daimler-Benz engine seizes with a metallic shriek. The propeller windmills uselessly. Fisher is 220 miles from the nearest German airfield, gliding a dead aircraft at 26,000 feet. He does the math automatically. 1 mile of altitude equals 8 miles of glide distance under perfect conditions. He has 26 miles of altitude. Even in perfect conditions, which these aren't, with a shot-up airframe and partial hydraulic failure, he might reach 150 miles. 70 miles short. He bails out at 18,000 feet, descending through a sky that has become a graveyard. 3 Bf-109s burn below him, trailing smoke all the way to the ground. An EW-190 cartwheels past, tumbling end over end. Its pilot dead or unconscious in the cockpit. Fisher counts 9 parachutes. 9 men who will spend the rest of the war in prison camps if the Americans capture them before angry civilians exact revenge. The Brunswick raid lasts 4 hours. 56 German fighters rise to meet the Americans. 31 never return. The Messerschmitt factory burns. Production halted for 3 weeks. The P-38 groups lose 6 aircraft, a loss ratio of better than 5 to 1. May 19, 1944. Luftwaffe headquarters, Berchtesgaden. Galland delivers his final report on the lightning threat. His conclusions are stark. The P-38 has become the most dangerous aircraft in the American arsenal. Its combination of range, firepower, and high-altitude performance has neutralized our defensive advantages. Our pilots fear it more than the P-47 or P-51 because it can appear anywhere, at any altitude, at any time. The fork-tailed devil has evolved from a joke into a nightmare. He includes specific recommendations. Avoid combat above 25,000 feet where the lightning dominates. Never engage in sustained turning fights. The P-38's superior power-to-weight ratio at altitude makes this suicidal. Use diving attacks and immediately break away. And most importantly, conserve forces. Every experienced pilot lost cannot be replaced. The report reaches Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring's desk. He reads it once, crumples it, and throws it in a wastebasket. Galland has lost his nerve. Göring tells his staff, "The Luftwaffe doesn't need pessimism. It needs victories." 2 weeks later, Galland is removed from operational command. June 5, 1944. RAF Cologne, England, the day before D-Day. Jenkins sits in the officers' club, nursing a warm beer. Outside, ground crews work through the night, painting invasion stripes on every aircraft in England, 5 alternating black and white bands around the wings and fuselage. Identification markers for the thousands of Allied aircraft that will fill the skies tomorrow. A young pilot, fresh from the States with 12 hours, and the P-38 approaches nervously. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Jenkins nods, too tired for military formality. "Is it true what they say about the Lightning being hard to fly?" Jenkins considers the question. Hard to fly, yes and no. The P-38 demands respect. Its counter-rotating propellers eliminate torque's eye. But pilots must manage 2 engines, 2 fuel systems, 2 sets of instruments. The turbo superchargers require careful monitoring. Push them too hard and they fail, leaving you with half your power at altitude. The aircraft is fast, but that speed comes with consequences. Dive too steeply and compressibility lockup can kill you. Lose an engine and the asymmetric thrust will flip you inverted if you're not ready. But once you master it, once you truly understand what Lockheed's engineers created, the P-38 becomes an extension of your body. You don't fly it, you wear it. The visibility from that central nacelle cockpit is unmatched. The concentrated nose armament puts devastating firepower exactly where you're looking. The twin engines provide redundancy that has saved countless lives. And that range, that beautiful, unprecedented range, means you never abandon the bombers. Never leave your wingman. Never turn back because you're hitting fuel limits. The Lightning isn't hard to fly, Jenkins finally says. It's hard to fly poorly. Master it, and you'll never want to fly anything else. The young pilot nods, not entirely reassured. Jenkins drains his beer and stands. Get some sleep, Lieutenant. Tomorrow, we're taking this war to France. And those German fighters that used to mock our flying fuel tank, they're going to learn what it feels like when the fuel tank shoots back. At dawn, 10:00, Allied aircraft will fill the skies over Normandy. Among them, 300 P-38 Lightnings will fly combat air patrol, escort missions, and ground attack runs. By sunset on June 6th, the Luftwaffe will contest the invasion with fewer than 200 sorties, a force so depleted, so demoralized, so thoroughly beaten that it can barely influence the battle. The fork-tailed devil has fulfilled its promise. The mockery is over. The slaughter has just begun. August 18th, 1944. Over Lechfeld, Germany. Captain Arthur Kit Carson leads his flight of P-38S at 32,000 feet. So high the earth curves beneath him, a brown and green tapestry stitched with silver rivers. The oxygen is thin here. Each breath a conscious effort through the rubber mask clamped to his face. Ice crystals form on his canopy despite the summer heat far below. His gloved hands rest lightly on the control yoke after 287 combat hours in the Lightning. The movements are automatic, subconscious, like breathing. Below, the Messerschmitt production facility at Lechfeld sprawls across the Bavarian landscape. This is where Germany builds its latest hope, the Me-262 jet fighter. Intelligence photos show 30 completed aircraft on the field, perhaps another 20 under construction. Reichsmarschall Göring has promised Hitler that the jet will sweep the skies clean of American bombers, restore German air superiority, turn the tide of the war. Carson's mission is to ensure that never happens. Bogies, 2 o'clock low, Angels 2-0. His wingman's voice crackles through the radio, calm despite the warning. Carson spots them a dozen Bf-109s climbing desperately from Lechfeld's runway, trying to gain altitude before the P-38S arrive. He recognizes the tactic: get above the Americans. Dive through with a single firing pass. Land immediately. Conserve fuel, conserve pilots, survive another day. But Carson has been flying combat missions since November 1942. He's faced the Luftwaffe over Tunisia, Sicily, Italy, France, and now Germany itself. He's watched the mighty German fighter arm disintegrate month by month. Brilliant tacticians replaced by frightened teenagers. Aggressive hunters reduced to cornered prey. Today's dozen defenders would have been 118 months ago. The mathematics of attrition have rendered their final verdict. Blue flight, take them. Carson orders. Red flight, we stay upstairs. They've got something else coming. His instinct proves correct 3 minutes later, when his radar warning receiver chirps new contacts. High and fast, diving from 38,000 feet. Carson cranes his neck, searching the sky above, and sees them 4 Me-262s. Their swept wings unmistakable even at 5 miles distance. Their jet engines leaving distinctive contrails as they accelerate to 540 miles per hour. The future of aerial combat. Diving toward him at speeds no propeller-driven aircraft can match. Hauptmann Franz Schall leads the Me-262 flight with the confidence of a man holding an unbeatable hand. He has 10 confirmed kills in the jet, more than any other pilot in the Kommando Nowotny. the elite unit tasked with proving the Tu-62's combat effectiveness. The Americans call their P-38 fast, but Shaw can fly circles around them literally. His top speed is 540 miles per hour, 120 miles per hour faster than any Lightning. His 430 cannons can shred a B-17 with a 2-second burst. And his acceleration, his climb rate, his sheer raw power, nothing in the Allied arsenal can compete. He centers the lead P-38 in his reflector's sight, fingers tightening on the firing button. Range 800 meters, 700, 600. The Lightning continues its steady flight, apparently unaware of the doom streaking toward it at 9 miles per minute. Carson waits until the last possible second, until his every instinct screams break now, and then hauls the P-38 into a vertical climb. Both Allison engines roar, turbo superchargers spooling up, two 850 horsepower driving the Lightning skyward at angles that seem impossible. His airspeed bleeds from 380 to 280 to 220 miles per hour. The aircraft hanging on its propellers, sacrificing speed for position. Shaw's Me-262 flashes beneath him, going so fast the German pilot can't possibly adjust his aim. The jet shoots past like a meteor, and in that half-second of passing, Carson sees the future with perfect clarity. If Germany had deployed this aircraft a year earlier, in numbers, the war might have taken a very different course, but they didn't. And now it's too late. The Me-262's incredible speed becomes its weakness. Shaw tries to zoom climb back up for another pass, but the jet's energy retention in a climb can't match its acceleration in level flight. The aircraft slows rapidly, and for 10 seconds, just 10 seconds, it hangs in Carson's firing envelope at 24,000 feet. Visible. Vulnerable. Close enough. Carson doesn't need 10 seconds. He needs 3. The P-38's nose lights up. 4 streams of .50 caliber tracers converge with the 20 cannon shells, creating a cone of destruction that walks up the Me-262's fuselage from tail to cockpit. The jet's thin aluminum skin, designed for speed rather than armor, disintegrates under the barrage. Fuel lines rupture. Control cables sever. 1 Jumo 004. Jet engine explodes in a brilliant flash. Turbine blades disintegrating into shrapnel that shreds the other engine. Shaw has time for one coherent thought, impossible, before his cockpit fills with smoke and flames. He reaches for the ejection handles. But the Me-262 doesn't have ejection seats. He tries to jettison the canopy manually, but the mechanism is jammed. The jet enters a flat spin, rotating slowly, almost gracefully, all the way down to impact. The remaining 3 Me-262s break off the attack, their pilots suddenly and violently aware that speed alone doesn't guarantee survival. They need altitude, distance, time to reassess. They accelerate to 520 miles per hour and run for home. Carson doesn't chase them. He knows the Lightning can't catch a fleeing jet in level flight. But he also knows something the German pilots are only beginning to understand. The Me-262 is a magnificent aircraft cursed by terrible timing, limited numbers, and chronic fuel shortages. Germany is producing perhaps 30 jets per month. The United States is producing 500 P-38S, 500 P-47S, and 500 P-51S every single month. The Germans have quality. The Americans have quantity that drowns quality in sheer overwhelming mass. Below, the Bf-109S have landed or died. Blue Flight reports 5 confirmed kills, 1 probable, no losses. The bomber formation drops its payload on Lechfeld's production facilities with devastating accuracy. Carson watches the explosions blossom across the factory complex. Secondary detonations erupting as fuel and ammunition stores detonate. 3 completed Mi-262s burn on the runway. 2 hangars collapse. Production will halt for 6 weeks, possibly longer. By the time Germany rebuilds, the war will have moved beyond recovery. November 8, 1944. Over Metz, France. Lieutenant Robert Shorty Arends flies his 197th combat mission, escorting a reconnaissance flight over recently liberated French territory. The skies are quiet. The Luftwaffe rarely contests airspace west of the Rhine anymore. German fighters husband their dwindling fuel supplies, waiting for the final defensive battles over the Reich itself. Arends uses the quiet time to think. He's been flying the P-38 for 2 years now, long enough to have seen it evolve from a line stepchild to an indispensable weapon. The early models with their turbo-supercharger problems and compressibility issues, those are ancient history. His P-38L5 incorporates every lesson learned from 10 000 combat missions, hydraulically boosted ailerons for crisp roll response, dive recovery flaps, improved intercoolers, even under wing racks for rockets or bombs. The Lightning has become more than a fighter. It's a fighter bomber, ground attack aircraft, reconnaissance platform, and night fighter. In the Pacific, it's the dominant American fighter, responsible for killing Admiral Yamamoto and dozens of Japanese aces. In Europe, it's flown more escort missions than any other aircraft. And the statistics, the cold, brutal statistics that measure success in aerial combat, tell an undeniable story. P-38 pilots have claimed 2 500 German aircraft destroyed in the air. Another 500 probables. Hundreds more wrecked on the ground during strafing runs. The loss ratio fluctuates between 2-1 and 5-1, depending on circumstances. But the trend is always in America's favor. Some pilots, men like Richard Bong with 40 kills, Thomas McGuire with 38, Charles McDonald with 27, have become household names. Their achievements celebrated in newspapers across America. But Arends knows the real measure of the Lightning's success isn't tallied in individual kill counts. It's measured in bombers that reached their targets and returned home, in strategic factories destroyed, oil refineries demolished, transportation networks shattered. The P-38 gave the 8th Air Force something it desperately needed in 1943, the ability to strike anywhere in German-controlled Europe and protect the bombers throughout the mission. The Germans never recovered from that capability. Falcon 2-3. This is base. RTB when ready. Mission complete. Arends acknowledges and banks toward England. The sun sets behind him, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Below, the scars of war mark the landscape: burned villages, cratered roads, the skeletal remains of bridges. But the bombs that fell here came from Allied aircraft, escorted by P-38s, striking targets the Germans once considered invulnerable. February 3, 1945. Tempelhof Airfield, Berlin. Lieutenant Werner Hoffmann walks across the tarmac toward his FW-190D9, one of the last operational fighters at Tempelhof. He's 22 years old and has been flying combat for 7 months, ancient by current Luftwaffe standards. Most of his squadron is dead. The rest have been reassigned to jets they'll never receive or bases that no longer exist. The morning briefing was surreal in its futility. Bomber formations inbound from England, 1-200 heavy bombers. Escort strength unknown, but estimated at 600. 800 fighters? German interceptors available, 47 aircraft across 3 airfields. The mathematics are so absurdly one-sided that Hoffmann almost laughed. He climbs into the cockpit and runs through his pre-flight checks mechanically. The FW-190 is a beautiful aircraft, powerful, rugged, capable. In 1943, it could fight any Allied fighter on equal terms. But this is 1945, and equal terms no longer exist. The Americans have air superiority so complete, so overwhelming, that simply taking off constitutes a suicide mission. At 0940 hours, Hoffmann lifts off from Tempelhof. He climbs to 22,000 feet and spots the bomber formation's vast aerial armadas stretching across the horizon, their contrails creating artificial clouds, and above them, weaving gracefully, are the escorts, P-38 Lightnings, P-47 Thunderbolts, P-51 Mustangs, hundreds of them. Hoffmann selects a single bomber separated slightly from the main formation. He pushes his throttle forward, accelerating to 380 miles per hour, and begins his diving attack. Perhaps he can hit one B-17 before the inevitable happens. Two P-38S from the 55th Fighter Group drop from above like hunting falcons. They don't dive frantically or spray bullets wildly. Their approach is measured, professional. Almost casual, the confidence of predators who know the prey has nowhere to run. Hoffmann sees them at 600 meters. Too late. He tries to brake, but his aircraft is heavy and sluggish. Fuel tanks nearly full for the planned return flight he'll never make. The first Lightning opens fire at 400 meters. The second Lightning holds position, ready to finish the job if needed. It isn't needed. The .50 caliber rounds punch through Hoffmann's engine. Cowling with industrial efficiency, the BMW 801 radial engine seizes instantly. Fire erupts from the cowling. Hoffmann has perhaps 5 seconds before the fuel tanks explode. He jettisons the canopy and rolls inverted, falling free into the freezing air at 20,000 feet. His parachute deploys with a snap, and he looks up to see his FW-190, the aircraft he's flown for 87 missions, cartwheel into the clouds and vanish. Around him, the sky is full of parachutes. 9, 12, 15. The bombers continue their steady flight toward Berlin's industrial heart, untouched, almost leisurely in their precision. The P-38S maintain their weaving escort pattern, patient, vigilant, ready for any threat that might emerge. But no threats emerge. The Luftwaffe has nothing left to give. Hoffmann descends through the morning sky, watching the city of his birth burn beneath him. He thinks about the propaganda photos he saw in 1942 German pilots posing beside their kill markers. Victory after victory tallied on aircraft fuselages. He remembers the jokes about the American flying fuel tank, the mockery and dismissal. The mockery seems obscene now, grotesque. The P-38 Lightning didn't win the air war alone, but it arrived at the critical moment when the 8th Air Force needed it most, when unescorted bombers were dying by the dozens, when victory seemed impossibly distant. It gave American bomber crews a fighting chance. It forced the Luftwaffe to defend everything simultaneously, stretching thin reserves until they snapped. And it killed German fighters, thousands of them, in a grinding campaign of attrition that Germany's depleted pilot training program could never sustain. The fork-tailed devil, the flying tank, the ungainly, overcomplicated design that shouldn't have worked. History will record that it worked better than anyone, especially the Germans who mocked it, could have possibly imagined. Hoffmann lands in a snow-covered field outside Berlin. Soviet artillery rumbles to the east. American bombers drone overhead. The war will be over in 3 months. The Lightning's war is already won.